When I awakened, it was 2 weeks later. I looked like a science project with all the tubes and wires attached to my body. I noticed several of my family members were standing around my bed. They all had these weird smiles on their faces. I didn't really know where I was or what had happened. Apparently, the same day I went into the coma, my wife, who was also in the medical field, was able to contact one of the top hospitals in Chicago about my case. Northwestern Hospital had dealt with a few cases similar to mine, so they quickly accepted it. I was flown by helicopter to Northwestern Hospital on the same day of the coma. Thanks to God's grace and the excellent proficiency of Northwestern Hospital, my life was saved. The doctors discovered that I had contracted a rare virus known as blastomycosis from the dirt and mold on the wood when I punctured my hand in the garage that day. The infection was so rare that the pneumonia-like symptoms often confused both the patient and the doctors as well. In many cases, this medical misjudgment nearly cost me my life. However, I am thankful through the grace of my Father that I overcame the storm and began my real life's journey. The sickness, in my opinion, was the purifying fire for my life. It was the purging tool most needed at that time. It allowed me to move close enough to the experience of death that I was able to clearly look back and see life for the very first time. Since then, I've made full recovery for the most part. What I gained most from the experience was that I learned to live. The sickness exposed me to my Father, but it also showed me life itself. It's sad to say, but it took me nearly losing my life in order to actually find my life. Amazingly, I really don't regret going through the sickness. I tell people this all the time. When I first went into the wilderness, or the sickness rather, I thought it was all punishment. But after going through it and coming out of it, I now look back at myself and realize it was all development. The sickness and the recovery gave me 12 years to grow and develop in God. I say the time was well worth it. Homebound. After almost 2 months in Northwestern Hospital, I was allowed to go home. I was excited to get a chance to finally lie in my own bed and sit in my favorite chair. This was also the first time in almost a year that there was no sickness, no hospital, no doctors, and definitely no machines. Home sweet home. There's no place like home. That was my initial thought. Amazingly, it only took a few weeks for me to realize that being home every day for the next year or so might prove to be tougher than my stay in the hospital. Initially, I loved all the me time, as they say. However, that got old very quick. It didn't take very long for me to grow tired of me. My mind started doing a real number on me. You would have thought after just having survived a near-death experience, I would be joyous and not worrying about anything. To be honest, that was far from the truth. As soon as the smoke cleared and the health was no longer an issue, I began to worry about everything else. The mind is crazy. It's like the mind is built to worry. I was starting to really fall apart because I couldn't seem to get a grip on myself mentally. This was not what I expected to experience coming home. Then, to top things off, I remember telling God while in the hospital that if He would heal me and let me go home, I would never stress about anything ever again. Yeah, right. Of course, we say that in a moment of crisis. However, now that I was home and recovering, there were surely other things to worry about. My biggest setback during this time was the fact that I couldn't totally walk on my own. Compile that with the fact of me not working for over a year, and what you end up with is an individual crippled on every level. All sorts of things started going through my mind. I started wondering how long it would take to get back full use of my legs. The sickness had literally knocked me off my feet. It took months for me to get adjusted to walking again. I couldn't believe at 38 years old, I had to use the assistance of a walking device. This was not how I pictured my life, to say the least. On many occasions, I have shared with people the truth that the worst part of my sickness wasn't even the sickness itself, but the recovery. When I was sick, there was nothing for me to think about outside of the intensity of the sickness. Now that I was better, unfortunately, I was left alone with myself. Therein is a real big problem. If you have never spent any real extended time completely alone, and for whatever reason you are forced to do so, you are going to be in for a rude awakening. At some point, you become aware of your mind. You find out just how busy things are up there in that mind. You find out that the mind is a chatterbox. This is the one main reason why we can't hear our Father, because the mind is constantly speaking. It paints mental pictures and blabs all day long. Sad to say, in many instances, the mind doesn't always speak positive. What's even sadder is that we are accustomed to listening to the craziness. I really needed to get myself together at this point. I thought I was a lot stronger than I actually was. I thought I had a lot more faith than I actually had. The truth of the matter is, between the sickness, the recovery, finances, loneliness, and the constant running of the mind, I was literally a wreck. On some days I cried and even got mad at the Father. I had already survived the sickness, so why did I have to suffer so much more through the recovery? I literally felt like life was being sucked right out of me once again, and this time it wasn't illness related. Little did I know, I was being purged of self. My whole recovery period was just another part of my wilderness experience. If I was going to be effective for God, then I was going to have to deal with me first. What's most amazing to me now is that without being homebound for so long, I really wouldn't be where I am now. Believe me when I say the wilderness or the isolation was a necessary part of Jesus' journey. Thus, if we too are going to overcome the world as well as ourselves, then at some point, periodic isolation has to become part of our journey as well. I would totally be honest. In the beginning, my ego tried to convince me that everything I had been through was punishment. Now, however, I know that through all my trials, it was actually development.